Hey, dude, can I have some vinyl?
Hell no, dude. I see you in this fucking record store every fucking day. You think I'm just gonna fucking you think I'm just gonna give you some fucking vinyl? Fuck you, you fucking Bandcamp baby. All right? Fuck you.
I just want the new Kasi Harris, man. God. Hey, let me have a little bit of vinyl.
Let's see. Let's see what I have. Ooh, I do have some. All right.
Appreciate it, partner. Yeah.
The next day,
Hey man, I got you a sack of Remo Drive LPs there, dude. You enjoy that shit, bro. It's good shit.
Tight. I like Remo Drive. Okay, let's see. Let me get this bag real quick. Let me open it up real quick. I don't know what kind of vinyl this is. That's damn man. This isn't the Remo Drive that I know. Oh man, this shit.
kindness, take part. God, what is this bit?
Love this one.
Oh, Jesus Christ. Hello, everybody. Welcome to the Indieheads podcast. I'm your host, Matty, at Monovian Prince on Twitter. On this podcast, we have Dill.
Hey,
We got
that's
Nat.
it. Hey.
Nat. Hey, at Framing the Pick on Twitter. Hey.
And then we have Rose.
Hey.
All right. And then finally, Jackson.
Also, hey, at horse_jeans at twitter.com. You know who it is.
Yes, here we are back. We are back, baby, for another pod. This one inspired by the fact that we just put out another quarterly collection list of our favorite records of the second quarter, and so this podcast is going to be sort of a catch up on the quarter in general. We're going to talk about some of the stuff that's on our list, some stuff that we did not discuss on the list, and everything in between. So before we get into the group discussions, we want to kind of talk about some of the individual picks that we had, either stuff on the list or stuff that not enough of us like have. There's not enough of a group discussion to have for some of these records. So these are just, again, quick soapbox for a minute or two. I'm going to start off. One record that's on my list that I'm going to once again recommend to y'all. I recommended it on the last podcast. Going to do it again on this one. The new Pink Sifu album, Negro. It is a fucking amazing record, combining hardcore punk, sound collage, noise, hip hop. Just like it is the sound of the rage of this moment that we're in right now. And so, highly recommend it. It's great. A record that keeps climbing up my year end list. So that is what I have to say about that.
I finally
For
listened to
record-
it this week, and it's good. It's
Ooh.
really, really, really good. I liked it a lot.
Thank you. Okay, that's great. Dill, did you
I
ever
like
get
it.
around to it after you clowned on Pink Sifu in the last episode?
I did not. I want to, of course, formally apologize to Mr. Sifu for clown. I didn't clown, I did a goof, and but I humbly apologize for the goof. But no, I haven't been able to get around to this record yet.
I listened to it the other night. I was very sleepy. I was like, I should not listen to this. It's gonna keep me
Yes.
awake. And then I did come back to it today, and it's fucking solid. Like, it is a very harsh record, but goddamn, it is nice. Like, I don't know what else to say because I have still only listened to it a few times now, but like, it's definitely unique in the way it portrays the anger that it's going for. Yeah.
It's like shocking from the last Pink Sifu album I listened to. Like you definitely can see the through line or whatever, but it's like a huge shift in sound, obviously, for the kind of topics it's touching on, and it is one of the coolest produced albums I've heard this year. So definitely check it out. If not for the content, it's also really, really technically impressive. Highly recommend.
There's a song on here that shouts out Christopher Dorner, and it reminded me of something that happened in the chat a couple weeks ago, where Jackson was like, "Hey guys, trust me, I'm having a normal one right now. It's okay, but I'm reading Christopher Dorner's manifesto right now."
Just normal Tuesday stuff, you know? Sometimes you just gotta bust it out and remember that Christopher Dorner talked about how much he enjoyed the Hangover movie trilogy in his manifesto. Like, these are
And he just
important
wanted
things
Todd Phillips to make sequels and water down the
Let
formula.
me
He's like, the funniest part of it is it wasn't like, hey, stop after the first one, the formula's gold, which is a questionable take on its own, but like at least some people had that take. He was like, stop after 3. 3 was good, don't push it too far, and like 2 and 3 were atrocities on humanity. The whole thing is just bizarre.
Can I read it real quick? Okay.
Go ahead.
Okay,
Read the
this
quote.
is once again, this is not a joke. This is literally in his manifesto. If you find his manifesto online, you will find this bit in there. I cannot stress enough it's a joke, because I told someone this and they're like, "You're fucking with me," and I'm like, "No, this is in there."
It seems like something Gavin wrote. It does seem like a bit.
Okay. It's kind of sad I won't be around to view and enjoy The Hangover 3. What an awesome trilogy. Todd Phillips, don't make any more hangovers after the third. Takes away the originality of its foundation. World War Z looks good, and The Walking Dead Season 3, parentheses, second half, looked intriguing. Damn, gonna miss Shark Week. Oh, God.
Who among us will not miss Shark Week?
Yeah.
Who among us?
Okay.
Indeed.
You know, when I'm gone, all I'm going to be thinking about is all those Shark Weeks I'm missing out on.
Rest in peace to Shark Week. I think it's still going on, but you know, rest
in peace anyway.
But for a record,
it's not the Shark Week I used to know.
Okay. For a record that sadly is not quite as good as Negro, the new Remo Drive record, Portrait of an Ugly Man. It's just sad. It's just sad because the thing with Remo Drive, I've been a defender of their Discog post greatest hits. I quite enjoyed the pop music EP, and I quite enjoyed Natural Everyday Degradation. I was a minority there, but I enjoyed the last record, and I was like, okay, they're putting out a new one real quick. I mean, wonder what's the deal, but like, as I said in the cold open, oh man, it's shit. It's shit.
I haven't even listened to it yet because I respect myself.
And honestly,
too much.
You should stick with it.
I saw the lines with the Apple Store stuff. I was just like, I can't. This album will literally just like devolve my brain a level if I listen to this.
I re-listened to it today for the pod, and I didn't hate it as much as I did the first listen, but it was like, there's like not a lot here. There's just really not a lot.
I have to give the Remo Boys credit for allowing Hobo Johnson to ghostwrite every song on this album.
Right.
Oh God. Okay, but for real though, the lyrics on this record are really bad, and I think there's like a couple reasons for that. One, just I think Eric has just evolved as a writer. I hate to say it. Like I said, I'm friendly with the boys. They're nice guys, but like I gotta be honest here. Some of these lyrics are really, really bad, because I think the big thing is that they're trying to push for what is quote unquote a more mature sound, but the issue is that the lyrics are still as immature as they were before, but they don't have that emo whine or that like bit of a swarminess that kind of makes that first Remo record so good. It's like, okay, it's got the emo whine, it's got a little bit of a tongue in cheek. This is kind of good. That tongue is still in the cheek, but now it's just like there's like a blade on the tongue, and it just bursts through the cheek, and so it's like, this is just shit. And instead of just like the signature emo whine, he's trying to sound like Morrissey, and
which is an insane choice, just a preposterous choice.
It's a really bad
level.
choice, because Eric is not a good singer. He's not a good singer, which is why the emo whine works, because the emo whine is able to cover up some of the spots. But now here's like
the great equalizer.
No one should ever try to emulate Morrissey in anything, like political views, singing. Just don't
It's
do it.
yeah, it's bad, and then of course there's just some garbage ass lyrics on this thing. Honestly, I don't even want to read them out because it's just like it's honestly for you to figure that out on your own. Like just surprise yourself here. And again,
Yeah.
I must reiterate, I don't like the fact that I'm dunking on this record. I really don't want to do that, but at the same time, you gotta be honest. You gotta be honest. This is not a good record. And I think what makes me feel, I guess, more okay with dunking on this record is that there's a song on here called "The Night I Kidnapped Remo Drive," which is just like one of the most shitty responses to like criticism that I've ever heard. You know, it's just like, oh, a bunch of people are like kind of turning on our band and not really liking our new music. Well, we'll show you with this song, and it's just like it just proves the point of the people that are critical. If anything, it just further digs them down this hole. And I should mention there are some good aspects of this thing. I think Star Warships is a good song. I think the band is getting better in terms of like, hey, they're like much better at their instruments, but the songwriting just isn't quite there. And Eric as a front man, just like he isn't as cool as he thinks he is. You're not Eric. I love you, buddy, but you're not Morrissey. I don't understand what you're trying to do on this record. I desperately want to understand. I'm going to probably find an interview just to figure out what's going on here. But, you know, like I respect Remo Drive for wanting to do something different, for not wanting to stay in the lane that they could have easily just kept making greatest hits over and over again. Well, kind of. I think greatest hits it's a record that's going to haunt them for a variety of reasons, but one, just the name itself is going to haunt them because it's just like, oh, you just literally signed your death warrant here for like the rest of your career, you know.
It's a self-fulfilling prophecy,
Exactly.
basically.
And if there's a band that I kind of if there's a band that I sort of look and see in parallel to Remo Drive, it's up until this point it was Joyce Manor, where I was like, okay, the debut album, you know, it's sort of this long gestating album with all these songs they've been working on over the years, and it's like, okay, like this is our band, like this is us, this is your introduction if you haven't already figured out who we are, you know, it's the best of the best. And then, you know, you have the second album, where it's definitely a change of pace. It's just a messy kind of all over the place record where it's just like, you know, it's sort of realizing, or at least thinking, that your 15 minutes of fame are up, and so you're just throwing everything but the kitchen sink at the wall and just hoping and seeing what sticks. And I think a lot of both of those records stick a lot for me. Both Of All Things I Will Soon Grow Tired and Natural Degradation. I think a lot of those stick for me, but for some other people, definitely not. And this album, it should have been They're Never Hungover Again. It should have been, okay, we're kind of seeing where we're reaching a point where we can't just keep making, you know, this pop punk. It's fun to play, but it's not fun to write anymore. So we need to find a way to kind of take this old sound and sort of mix it in with this direction that we want to go in, and just basically put together the one of the greatest records of all time, or just a banger of a record. You know, it's like, hey, it's got everything that's good about the old music and everything good about, you know, where we're going to be going in the future. But this is not that. This is not even close to being a Never Hungover Again. For one, of course, it's like twice as long, so duh. That's honestly a big thing. Some of these songs are just too fucking long, you know? Like Barry Johnson, one of his greatest things is the fact that he doesn't know how to write songs, so they're all like really, really short because he doesn't know how to extend them out. And it works. It's perfect. It's perfect. And I kind of wish that Eric also had that thing where he didn't know how to write songs, like just didn't know how to extend songs.
It seemed like he did on
He did,
Greatest Hits, because Greatest Hits has that kind of quality where like it's just
exactly.
hooks on hooks and then into a bridge and into a whatever, and it was just, there was a creativity and a liveliness that it is so frustrating for them to seem like, oh, we have to pivot to boring indie rock in order to be quote unquote mature. And it's like, the thing that was appealing about Greatest Hits was that it was taking a quote unquote immature genre like pop punk and elevating it with like pretty interesting musical structures and ideas, and also being fun. Which I think the lesson to be learned here is, if you are choosing between whether to emulate Morrissey or Never Hungover Again by Joyce Manor, you should choose Never Hungover Again by Joyce Manor. That's the correct choice there. And Remo Drive did not make that decision correctly. I mean, but also, there's only one Never Hungover Again, Matty. That's a little
This is true.
a little too
This is-
high of expectations to put on.
This is
Remo
true, and I wasn't expecting that high of expectations. I should state that I wasn't expecting like that high of expectation, but like career arc wise, like this is what they should have gone for, and they just didn't do that. I'm not gonna say like, hey, you should write a record exactly like Never Hungover Again, but like you want to go for
You
that
just
where it's like,
cover
okay,
Never Hungover Again in its entirety.
yes, I think they could do it.
It'd
But
be
I think you hit on a
better
good. I think you hit on a really good point, Jackson. That that this record, it's not fun. It's not a fun record, and that is fine if I was able to emotionally care about some of the songs going on here, but I don't. So it's just this 40 minutes of seemingly nothing, and it's sad. It's really sad, and that's all I have to say at this point.
All right. Well, I can talk about my picks now if you're done. I have a couple, so I'm going to go through them quickly, including one that Matty has specified I need to put a time limit on, which we will get to in a moment. But I'm going to get through my other ones first. Some of these I wrote about, some of them I did not. The first thing I want to shout out is a compilation by the House of ALTR, which is a record label that Ace Mo and Mo Moretti, the DJ duo out of New York, it's their record label. So the last couple of Ace Moma releases have come out on this label, and they released a collection called HOA 010, which is a collection of Black electronic music, about 30 songs worth, and the if you buy it, half of the proceeds go to charities like Glitz, I believe, and I think there was like For the Girls was one of them, and then there were like two other ones, and then the other half of the proceeds go to all the artists involved. And it's a great way to support the past and future history of Black electronic music, and it's a really, really great compilation that shows how like the classic house sound continues to be something that is being elevated and experimented with and taken to new exciting directions. And there are a lot of very exciting producers on here like Martin Booty Spoon and Goucher Lustwork and Ace Mo and Mo Moretti and Huey Mnemonic and a whole bunch of other great artists. So I highly recommend checking that compilation out. I don't think anyone else listened to that in the chat. The next thing I'm going to talk about is the new Imagine Drowning record, which I wrote about. It's called Stain Liquor, which is one of my favorite album titles of the year. I really like it. It's gross. And the album cover is, as many people have pointed out, very eerily similar to the You Won't Get What You Want Daughters record cover, but with teeth, which makes it scarier. And this album is indeed spooky. It's an ambient album that I really, really like. I think it's not perfect. I talk about in my review how the track listing of it is kind of awkward, and I think a lot of the Imagine Drowning songs from this record and from my experience with all of the other Imagine Drowning music that I've checked out, they tend to like cut off kind of abruptly, where it's like he'll explore an idea for just a certain amount of time and then just sort of decide, okay, and the song ends here. And so as a result of that, it doesn't have a kind of real like easy flow to it like a lot of really good ambient albums do. And I think that would benefit the music a lot, but I also think it weirdly kind of works for what Imagine Drowning is going for in general, which is ambient music that is really soothing and ethereal and beautiful, but like there's a David Lynch kind of there's something wrong here vibe just creeping around the corners of like the whole thing. And the way that the tracks just kind of will stop unexpectedly and switch into another kind of sonic texture palette does feel kind of disorienting in a way that I feel like he's sort of going for, because the album closer Masks is this like 11-minute long song that like stops and starts and reintroduces ideas and then takes them away and then reintroduces them 5 minutes later. Like it's just a really subtly experimental record where you're listening to it and you're mostly just kind of basking in the spooky ambience, but it's got a lot going on. And in general, as I've sort of documented on my social media, like I don't know what the deal with Imagine Drowning is, who this person is, because this album has very high profile features for an ambient album. Like Tim Hecker is on here twice. There's a grouper feature. There's a feature from Posel, who I like a lot. There's a couple other artists who collaborated on this record, and it seems like the ambient music world knows who Imagine Drowning is, but Imagine Drowning has 2 tweets total and like 2 followers, and both of the tweets are at me thanking me for liking his music. So he's very off the grid and mysterious, and just is releasing a crazy amount of music because he's already put out this 55-minute album this year, and there was an earlier album from this year that was like 20 minutes long, and then there are these 2 ambient collections that are just like 30-second snippets that he released 3 of. So I there's just a lot going on with ambient, with Imagine Drowning, and all of the strange kind of mystique around his music, but I really, really like this album a lot, and am hoping that he can build on this, which is clearly his most ambitious record to date. Like, it's like 30 minutes longer than any of his other projects. So I'd really love to see where he goes post Stain Liquor, but I really enjoy this album a lot.
Jackson, can I ask, how did you find this record? Because I remember you dropped it in the Discord, I think like a month and a half ago, and when I went to the Bandcamp page and no one had bought it. It
I
took
don't
like
know.
it took like 3 weeks for like a Rate Your Music page to pop up, and even then it only has like 3 or 4 ratings right now.
Yeah, okay.
How did you find this?
I actually kind of forget. I think it either might have been recommended to me by a Spotify algorithm, or I think it might have just been that I was looking on like Tim Hecker's Spotify page and saw that he was featured on it on like the I think I was searching for Tim Hecker and found it. I'm not exactly sure how I found it, but it is so strange that seemingly from the amount of like internet space he occupies, it seems like this was like the first record that's ever gotten any attention, but that doesn't make any sense because it has Tim Hecker already on it. Like, how do you get Tim Hecker on the track before you've like made a name for yourself at all in the scene? I don't know. Some people have speculated that it's perhaps an anonymous pseudonym for a bigger artist. Some people have even speculated it's a Tim Hecker side project because it has a lot of similarities to Tim's. I mean, he's on here twice, but it has a lot of similarities in general. But I don't know. It just sort of appeared to me like a ghost in my internet, and I am transfixed by its strange hypnotic power.
That's
I think
that's
this
about
record
as fitting as you could get, I think.
it came to you in a dream. It's like a Twin Peaks dream. You're in the Black Lodge, and then Laura Palmer or the other arm just hands you the record and be like, "Yeah, listen to this record," and then just you go from there.
Yeah, we talked about that. We kind of want to see if we can get the artist behind Imagine Drowning on the pod, but also feel like if he was on the pod, he would just speak in like ambient music or like forbidden knowledge. And so we'll see if that ever happens. But I am keeping my eye on Imagine Drowning and his music in general because I found this album to be very interesting.
If they do come on the pod, like we will put your voice through a filter. We will help you stay anonymous as long as possible. We're in for the bit. We're in for the bit, and I'm very excited.
Anyways, if no one else has anything else to say, I would like to switch into, because I have other things to talk about. We have a lot of albums to get to today. Midwife. I had never listened to Midwife before the last like month and a half, and I am now obsessed with Midwife. Midwife is a mix of genres that feels like it was built in a lab for me, to the point where like, I think someone shared like the description of this album that's in the Pitchfork review in the chat, and I was just like, that immediately we're checking that out, because it is essentially what if grouper but shoegaze is the easiest pitch I can give to people, because she shares a lot of production and songwriting similarities with grouper, where it's very, very lo-fi and very sparse and minimal. There's not a lot of layers of production, and her lyrics are relatively short, and she'll repeat a phrase often. a couple of times throughout a song. But then the difference is if you take Grouper, but it's like, what if we have some real sludgy riffs, some real heavy, distorted, thick, just guitar riffs you can swim in like an ocean of distortion, like just the good shit, as I like to call it. This album is Forever is the new Midwife album that just came out, and it is very, very, very sad. It is an album that is about grief and about a sudden loss that happened to one of Midwife's friends. Colin Ward passed away in 2018, and this album is sort of dedicated to Colin and features a very, very long poem from Colin that comes in about the midpoint of the album on the track CRFW. And you hear him read this poem in its entirety that was recorded in like 2012, but is Colin talking about death. So it's a person basically talking about their own death years before it will happen. And it's very, it sounds very heavy and like just a lot to deal with and kind of like almost in a too much way. But I think the thing that's so beautiful about the poem and the album in general is that it's not a dark nihilistic look at life. There's the really, really, really beautiful quote that ends the poetry, where he talks about that like a leaf on a tree, and he describes it as saying that like a leaf, when it falls off a tree, doesn't say, no, don't take me off the leaf. It lets go, finally not having to hold on anymore, and it falls to the ground. And like it's spooky listening to someone talk about their own death like that, but it is so incredibly moving. And I think it really is one of the most moving attempts to like memorialize another person that I've seen since, dare I say it, Benji. And I've said to like Lily, this album is essentially like the inverse of Benji, where it's basically like Benji is using all of these words to try to describe people in their lives and to sort of give you a sense of like, Mark tells you these long stories to give you the feeling of that people's lives are so expansive, and when someone is lost, there's so much history and details and memory that is lost with them. And instead, Midwife is the exact opposite, where she uses as little words as possible to say these, to describe these feelings, because they're so profound and like apocalyptic. Like on the song Language, the whole song is just, how do I say it in every language? How do I say it in every language? I will never forget you. That's like the whole lyrics of the song, and it's like a 5-minute song, but it's just beautiful in the way that it essentializes kind of the feeling of grief and loss. And I really, really love this album. I really love the other Midwife music, including the EP she released 2 years ago, and her debut album song. No, her debut album is called Like Author, Like Daughter, which is actually, I think, my favorite Midwife album. It's so fucking good. But I highly recommend Forever, which is a very beautiful, moving album. And I highly recommend Midwife's music in general. It will make you want to lie on a floor, but in a good way, is my pitch.
It is time, Jackson. It is time. I'm gonna put put
right.
the timer on the clock. So of course, if you all
Speak
are
of the
fans of
devil.
podcasts, you know that Jackson is a big fan of Mark Kozelek, almost too much, because he talks about Mark Kozelek very, very often.
Almost
So
every episode.
instead of the usual 10 minutes minimum that we give him to talk, we're giving him only 3 minutes to talk about the new Mark Kozelek record. So okay, on the clock, 3 minutes.
I'm ready.
Ready, set, go.
God damn it, he's done it again, folks. It's the new Mark Kozelek album. It's called All the Best Isaac Hayes. I can't believe it's taking this long for there to be a Mark Kozelek album where the cover is just a boxing match. Like, it feels like we've been coming toward this point for a long time. And I was surprised it took this long, but it's here. And it also should really just be called Mark's Canadian Tour Diary, because it's essentially almost entirely about his travels across Canada, and then it gets into the South a little bit in the second half, and he talks about North Carolina and Tennessee and stuff. But
Yeah.
this is the most spoken word he's maybe ever gotten. He does not sing at any point on this album. He speaks in a speaking voice the whole time, which is fine. I could listen to him read the phone book and I would enjoy it. So the fact that it is good is an added bonus. And I really, really, really like this album. I like it significantly more than the other Mark Kozelek album that was released this year. I really love the piano instrumentation, and I think the subtle occasional use of the acoustic guitar, the signature Koz instrument, is a nice change of pace and is utilized subtly. And my favorite song on the album is Winnipeg. It's really, really good. Anytime Mark sings songs or tells stories about being kind and empathetic to homeless people, it makes me cry every single time. And Winnipeg is my favorite song on the album. There's also a 21-minute song about Los Angeles where he references other Mark Kozelek songs like Footnotes, where he's like, if you want to hear more about this part of my life, please check out this song and this song that were recorded during the period of my life where I lived in Los Angeles. He's a fucking madman, folks. He's done it again. If you don't care about Mark Kozelek, this is not the place to enter, would maybe my one point of advice. It is him kind of to the maximum degree, but also I think is much more successful than some of his other experimental spoken word experiments that he's done. It's much better than like Yellow Kitchen or anyways.
By the way, the 3 minutes isn't up. I just changed the timer ending. I was changing it and it went off, and I was like, okay, cool. You have 30 more seconds, Jackson. You have 30 more seconds. You have more to say.
You know the spiel. His music is the compass by which I live my life, and that's problematic. But here we are. You should check it out.
He's done it again.
In my opinion.
Jackson, I want to read a tweet that Cam just retweeted on my timeline really quick.
Yeah, I sent it in the.
Sun Cold Moon Guy has the same flow as Young Lean.
Oh my god!
Oh.
He's not. They're not wrong. You know, it's a fair comparison. I think they're two of the most important artists of the 2010s, and I love a good comparison between them.
All right.
That's enough for perhaps the podcast.
All right, Nat, it is your turn to get on the soapbox.
All right. I'm gonna try and work through these as quickly as I can, just because I don't really have much to exposit on many of these, and a couple of these I wrote about in the Q2 thing, and I feel like whatever I wrote there is going to be better and more put together than what I'm saying here. But I'm going to start with Owen Pallett's Island, which is right now my current, I think, front runner for album of the year. But a lot of that comes from heavy bias from being really attached to Owen Pallett's previous work. And for reference, Owen Pallett, Canadian violinist. You know them best for their work in Arcade Fire, who are known for their criminally underrated album, The Suburbs. And
no one's ever heard that one.
But Owen makes these really lush, gorgeous, intricately detailed orchestral chamber pop albums. And at this point, they've kind of have a style that they're known for, which is these heavily layered multiple loops on top of each other, blending of orchestral and electronic. The last album that they did before this one, In Conflict, was their biggest pivot toward the electronic, and this one scales that in an entirely different direction. It's a direct continuation of an album that they had done 10 years previously called Heartland, and it is both a sequel, but also its self-contained own thing. It doesn't really have a concrete narrative to speak of, but it's more interested in the ways in which people self-destruct and how they continually re-enter into the same habits that destroy themselves over and over again. And in this case, it's an existential crisis that comes after the character has apparently killed God and is just kind of wandering around trying to figure out what to do with himself, drinking himself to death, endangering other people, eventually getting fucked so hard that he is launched into space. And the style of the record is this really fascinating paring back of their typical approach, where before a lot of it was very maximalist and really sort of piling on layer after layer. There is a lot of intentional empty space on here rather than the lead instrument being the violin. Owen trades it out for these really sort of spare, vacuumous, acoustic finger-picked guitars that just kind of really resound in this empty space. And the way that they build up the album is eventually when the orchestral bits come back, they come back during this song that's the centerpiece of the album, A Bloody Morning, where there is a literal shipwreck being described as the character is trying to get people through a violent storm while just blind drunk. And it's this absolutely harrowing moment that's made all the more effective for the fact that it's really sort of using that restraint. And I don't know, it's one of those albums that is very emotionally direct and to the point, but its bareness really sort of resonates with me, and really kind of gets to me in a way that none of their other stuff had done, just because a lot of their other stuff I'd also had that strong emotional connection to, but it does very much hinge on the theatrical, the sort of like grand expressions, and this one is all kind of internal and most of it's muted, and it was really just a great album to just sit in the dark, headphones on, and just focus on the ways in which the sort of soundscapes formatted. So yeah, that's what I have to say on that one.
Yeah, I do think it is a very unique record, especially like I've listened to a lot of Owen's production work by now because I'm very into the kind of bands who seem to get them on board for their records. Like last year, their production on In League with Dragons was some of my favorite production on any record, and this record certainly does kind of like emulate that same strings vibe, but like it takes it in a much more low key direction, which is very interesting. Like I think this record is one that is very much a headphones album over anything else, as you mentioned.
Hmm. Yeah. Um, so yeah, I think that's most of the piece that I had on that. Then these other couple I'm just gonna kind of blaze through because I don't really have nearly as much to say on them. But I wanted to shout out the Ada Rook album, 2020 Knives, which is in the entirely opposite direction, an hour-long, noisy, industrial synth pop album. But really, I think, overwhelms the senses and sort of envelops you in a way that has kind of been hitting me in a way that like even some of her other work, be it solo or in any of the number of collaborations that she's done, hasn't really been hitting me. And I think it's part of the ways in which it compounds a lot of similar subject matters across its track listing, because so much of the album is built on this sort of constant sense of callbacks and duality in the ways in which certain subjects are portrayed, things about fitting in with womanhood, abuse and trauma, any number of mental neurodivergencies. But the album has this really fascinating sort of way in which it charts that by starting off very kind of loud and aggressive and scream heavy, and close to the midpoint of the album it kind of pairs that back, and the back half starts to become more withdrawn and more sort of taking stock of oneself and really sort of goes within. And it's when the album kind of explodes back on its last track in Ocean, which is basically the song where she's just fully letting loose everything that she's been holding back for half of the album, that I think it really seals the deal. It's a long and exhausting album, and prior to writing the write-ups, I'd only listened to it once because it drained me so much, and then I listened to it 3 times in a row to do the write-up, and it drained me to a point where now I need to take a break for a while.
Yeah, it is probably her definitely her biggest solo work. Like she's always made very big albums, like talking about Void Fantasy or anything like that. It's just like, ooh, it is overwhelming to listen to a lot of her solo work, but this one kind of maps it out in a way that feels a lot more natural in its arc, I think. And it works to its benefit, especially because like when you hit that second half, like the songwriting just hits a peak where it's just operating at like especially great capacity. Like you've got Wake, Breathe, September, and Strangers all on that second side, and it's just like insanely emotionally overwhelming, but also you're just like, God, she is good at this songwriting.
Yeah,
Like more
especially.
than anything.
Yeah, I was gonna say, especially the place that I know myself and some of us in the chat have singled out is on that song "Strangers," where she takes this approach that is very sort of more clinical and biologically focused, because she's sort of describing how she doesn't feel attached to herself in her personhood and sees herself as more of like a bug going through a metamorphosis, and describes this sort of intense morphology process. And it's one of the moments where that sort of pivot into a different lyrical style just like really just fully knocks you back.
Yeah, like the way she can describe things sometimes feels clinical, but in like a way where you're still like, I fully understand every emotion she's trying to portray here, and it works beautifully at times.
um so yeah, that's about as much as I had to talk about that one. And the last one, I didn't plan any discussion on this whatsoever, because I found out about this record literally today. But while I'm on a sort of chamber pop thing with Owen Pallett, Gordy, who is a folktronic artist who's on Jaguar. I had heard her last album, Reservoir, in 2017, and it is a good, solid album with some solid songwriting. But it's not really the kind of thing that like lingers in the brain, or like I kind of kept coming back to. And I had realized without seeing any press that she had dropped a new album today. That let's see, it's called Our Two Skins. And just immediately off the bat, it felt like just a kind of just the right amount of like tightening and refinement that really sort of gave it a little bit of an extra boost over Reservoir, just right off the bat, describing like in vivid detail um so many different elements of kind of rough relationships and anxiety to the point of panic attacks in like confined airplane bathrooms. And it's just straight away just fully kind of gripped me and didn't let go. And also something that I think she's always been consistently good on, but I think really sort of hammered home in this particular stretch, is she makes really good use of dynamic structures in a way where she'll subtly build up certain elements of a track, so that way when you get to the final chorus, there is something that has been like slowly building throughout the track that you just do not notice until it's kind of risen to the forefront. And I think she really tightened up that element of it too. But I just kind of latched onto that, and so I feel like I have a lot more to kind of delve into before I have more to talk about there.
Okay, so I guess it is my section of the thing now, since Nat is done. Just want to double check with everyone.
Yep, good to go.
Okay, so I'm going to go in reverse order from what I have written down, just because I'm going to go from most to least niche. So I want to start out with this Kate and V record, which I found a few weeks ago. It is very fascinating to me. It's like Russian electronic pop, which hits this extremely strange thing. Like, I can only describe it as like music you'd hear on a public access channel, but it's like actually kind of incredible at the same time. Like, it hits just this weird sound niche where I'm just like very comforted, but also like there's something wrong with this and I can't tell what it is. And it's just one of those records where I'm going to be sitting with it for a while, just trying to figure out like, what is the deal with this more than anything. And then the second one, which I can definitely go into more detail here now, is Pain Mop Girl 2020 by Default Genders. So last year, Default Genders put out an album called Main Pop Girl in 2019, and I kind of passed by it a little. Like I listened to it a couple times in the moment. I was like, oh, this is nice. And then this new version got announced, and it was mastered by Rook, who we talked about earlier. And of course, I pretty much check out like everything she masters at this point because it's like it's almost like a seal of quality on the thing at this point. Like you know, if somebody got her on board, it's probably really good. And so this album is like sort of a remix album of the original because there's like a lot of different versions of original tracks on there, but then there's also several new tracks, including an interpretation of one by one of the artists. Like, let me look. Oh, God, shut up. Sorry, my cat. No, no. Hang on. I'm sorry. I'm having to wrangle him and like get my stuff at the same time. You can cut this out if you have to. But anyway, so yeah, one of the tracks here is A Million Miles Away by Im Zavos, which is like an interpretation of her cover of Secret Garden by Bruce Springsteen off the last album. It's like everything is like a reinterpretation within a reinterpretation. I think it makes a very fascinating kind of process in a way, especially just the way the material ties together so nicely, even though it's made by like a dozen different people, including her. And plus, like the new method she's come with her music, which includes the more pitched out vocals, which kind of reflects her coming out in the last year. It's just a very beautiful album, which has a lot of very tragic writing that hits me in a specific way. I'm just like, oh, this is really good, but also it makes me sad to listen to it. I'm like, well, God, it's one of those things that just is extremely me. Like extremely my thing. And then finally, this is one that like pretty much everyone in here has listened to by now. And it's probably just gonna be mostly me and Dill, like Billy Woods did it again, Elucid did it again. But like new Armand Hammer record, Shrines, goddamn. They are an unbeatable streak with their music right now. Like 2017 they put out Rome, 2018 they put out Paraffin, which I thought was the best rap record of the last decade. Like it is so insanely good. And then this one's just like, oh yeah, we just did it again. Like, but it's just interesting because it feels like a natural progression of a trilogy in a way. Like they probably did not intend for all three of these to make that kind of soundscape movement, I guess, but like the way that you know, I talk too much, I know. Shut up, you little buddy. but don't bite me. But Rome is like, they talked about how Rome was very much the sound of like fire, and then Paraffin is the ashes in a metaphorical sense. I see this album as kind of the rebuilding on top of that. It's a much like brighter record in terms of like soundscapes and production. Like it's got very like crisp sample loops in a way that like the other two were going for this very murky and harsh aesthetic the whole time. And this one, while it does still have a little bit of menace, which is like kind of their signature, along with like the very abstract lyrics that are hard to understand. Like one minute you'll have Elucid talking about like the South Carolina state massacre from like the 1960s, and they're trying to make a greater point about time being an abstraction. It's just like very hard to keep up with, and it's even harder because they don't transcribe any of their lyrics online, and you have to go to like the shitty user made genius.com lyrics to find out any of what they're saying. It's just, they're just such a fascinating group to me, and they're probably one of the best rap acts operating right now. I love them dearly, and Billy Woods and Lucid are both, even on their own, they're fucking top notch. God, that's pretty much all I have to say. Will you stop biting me?
I think your cat is trying to cancel you, Rose. I think they're like, podcast? Nope.
The cat is mad about the representation of animals on the Armand Hammer Shrines album cover. It's like
That tiger is cool as fuck, though. You gotta
it is.
admit, somebody keeping a tiger in a Bronx apartment is like the sickest thing.
It's such a cool album image and is very very evocative of like what the album is talking about and stuff. I really really like this today. I haven't been quite as on the whole Billy Woods train as other members of the chat, so I feel a little late to the party in multiple ways here, but goddamn, this is really 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 good. And obviously like you can make the comparisons to like Earl and Mike and the general kind of new wave of hip hop that's going on right now with, and like Earl produced the first song on the album. Like it's
Yeah,
clear.
and he's also a guest on it later on, as well as
Yeah.
like Navy Blue did a couple beats. So like
Yep.
it is approaching their circle, which is surprising considering that I'd say that Billy and Elucid have always been a very insular act. Like they always get guys that are in the backwoods studio label to do shit, and you never see anybody outside of that until now on their records, really.
Yeah, and I think it's an interesting evolution that I think makes a lot of sense because I think this album really does feel kind of, obviously it's in the Armand Hammer mode in general, but it feels very influenced by Earl and that whole kind of movement. And I think it acts as kind of a nice contrast to like some rap songs, where some rap songs is very kind of intentionally disorienting and strange in a way that this album is very weird and kind of experimental, but in a way that never really goes down with like it always, because they're so good at rapping and their flows are so good and they're so good at commanding control of these somewhat unwieldy beats, it gives them a kind of energy that Earl's music intentionally doesn't have. I think his music is much more depressive, while this is a lot more lively in its energy. But I really 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 like how this album is taking some of those styles and modifying them. And I think there's just some real good beats and some really really good raps is my review.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Anybody else?
All right.
All right,
I think
Dill.
Dill. It is on to you.
All right, my soapbox is going to be very brief, and I don't mean podcast very brief. All right.
On a very similar note to my last one.
I got the new Ka record, Descendants of Cain. I wrote about that in the Q2 write-up. You can go read some of my musings on this record. It's a wonderful record about family legacy and memories and history and historical trauma, and it does all this in this very nocturnal, uh, very very dark and shadowy atmosphere that it's able to build. Really wonderful record. It's one of my favorites of the year. The other record was also one of my favorites of the year. It's the new DJ Python one, and I'll bring Jackson into this one in a minute.
Yes, I would love to.
Yes. This one whips ass. I really, really love it. It's got, it's kind of pushes itself initially as this more of like a deep house, micro house kind of record. And then it opens itself up to a lot of these other influences track by track. It's got a really interesting flow. I don't know if you recognize this, Jackson, when listening to it, but
Yes.
each track, it's like one long track that just kind of builds a layer on top of it and just sits there for a few minutes.
It's all the same BPM for the entire 48 minutes, which seems like it's really 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 genius because it feels like it should be kind of boring or one note as a result of that, but the way that he builds layers of ambience and ideas on top of each other and the way it progresses over that 48 minutes, it makes it very 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 like hypnotic in a way that is really really effective. I mean, like DJ Python has cited like, there was an interview that he did with Pitchfork, I think, where he talked about how he really likes lo-fi beats to chill and relax to, and he thinks that is like genuinely like good music and like worthwhile. And I think this album is a really great example of how something can be chill and it can be very easy to consume and easy to sort of let create an ambiance that you can just easily float through, but it isn't ever like stale or boring or lifeless in the way that a lot of quote unquote chill music is. It's really, really interesting, and the kind of fusion of reggaeton and deep house is just this is the most I've enjoyed DJ Python. I think this is better than Dulce Campagna and the other the 2019 EP. I think this is the best DJ Python work yet. I really like it.
Yeah, and it's able to bring in again a lot of different influences from a lot of different genres. I mean, the deeper you get into the record, you get influences of footwork, you get ambient techno, Balearic beat. He's bringing in a lot of these styles and yet keeping it in a sort of foundational structure to the, like you said, the constant BPM, this very constant atmosphere and tone that he's working with through the entire thing. And then there's a spoken word section that reminds me a whole lot of something like Felicia Atkinson or Jeffrey Cantu Ledesma or Rafael Rosario, like some of these other, more notable current ambient producers. So he's pulling a lot of stuff onto this one, and I'm really, really enjoying it. So that's it. That's all I got.
All right, and now that those were our individual picks, and now we're gonna try our best to kind of get to some more records that came out that most of us listened to, that most of us want to discuss as a group, more than just the 2 or 3 dynamic ones. Although of course we're almost an hour in already, but who cares? Who cares? Who cares? We're gonna do it.
We can go 2 hours.
The first album that we have on this true group catch-up list is the new Jeff Rosenstock album, No Dream. Who wants to open the floor on this one?
Oh, yeah, I'll start it. Oh yeah. So Jeff has done it again. It's so that bit on Arrested Development where Lucille like has her lawyer Gene Parmesan, and he will always like surprise her with like the most obvious disguise possible, but she's still like, "Oh, Gene." That's me whenever Jeff drops a surprise album, even if I know it's coming. I'm like, "Oh, Jeff, you did it again! Wow."
Wow, another perfect album from Jeff Rosenstock.
I mean, he really does do it. I just think like for a minute there, I had my faith shaken with Post. Over time, I was like, this album's just okay. Like especially coming off of Worry, which is like a goddamn perfect album for Jeff. Like just coming off of that, I was like a little shaken. I was like, I'm worried. But this one is like actually really great. Like it takes a little bit to get set up, but once you get to like I don't know, like the title track and State Line, like you start getting some just incredible runs of tracks, especially with the second half where you get some absolute just crushers emotionally. Like Honeymoon Ashtray is one of the best and also most painful songs he's ever written. Like, oh, and then closing with Ohio Turnpike. Y'all can hop in if you want here.
I think for me, this is almost kind of I having time to sit with it. I feel like my thoughts on this are different than if we had ended up recording like an episode entirely dedicated to this, because for me it's actually kind of cooled off a bit. I still think the album is great. It is basically up to his usual standard of content, and like at this point I don't expect Jeff Rosenstock to drop a dud, just because he's refined his formula to such an extent that like it will satisfy the primal post-punk or pop-punk urges of my brain just whenever I listen to it. But I think something about the structuring, and specifically kind of like the stretch that you were talking about, Rose, where it's like the songs that start the album are good, but I don't feel immediately grabbed in or taken in as I am on like any number of his previous albums. And also the fact that I've more or less kind of been returning either to like specific stretches or like specific isolated songs, and haven't really felt as much of an urge to kind of listen through it as a cohesive whole as I have with Worry. It's an album that I can learn to appreciate in like pieces and chunks, and that's kind of where I am taking my appreciation of it right now. And maybe there will be a day like way forward in the future where like I am in a different mindset and I'm looking back on like the period in which this album was released in a different way where like it will absorb differently. But right now it feels kind of like the moment in which the album was released almost kind of has passed by in a sense, and like it's already kind of a bit of a strange reminder in my brain of like where things were like toward the middle of May.
Yeah, talking about records in 2020 is insane because you're like, oh, long ago, 4 weeks ago, when the
Yeah,
entire
like it feels like a fucking eon since this album came out, and it's been like a month.
Yeah, I'm with Nat on this one. I mean, but I will say off the bat, where I will differ from that, off the bat, I was already like, oh, I don't know how to feel about this record, and then listening to it today for this podcast, I was like, okay, I think I've kind of figured it out, but still, I'm on the fence, and I think it kind of does have to do with the fact that I do really love Post more than I guess most people on the pod. I think it's its best record. I think he was doing some really amazing, ambitious stuff on that record, and this just sort of seems like a back to basics in a way where it's like, well, I don't know why he went back to basics, because I was like in the direction he was going in, because it was the fact that like he was putting out like USA is 7 minutes long, Let Them Win is like 11 minutes long, and the fact that they both work is insane for a pop punk artist to make a song that's 11 minutes and for it to work completely. It's nuts. So this is just like it feels more like a Bomb the Music Industry album than a Jeff Rosenstock album. And
Oh yeah, extremely.
I'm not super into Bomb, so I think that's kind of where I differ from some people who are more excited and amped about this record than me. It's just like
This is why I like it. I just like Bomb the Music Industry a lot. This album's, I will say though, this album's fatal flaw, like the thing that kills it is that sequencing is just, it doesn't know what to fucking do for the order of the tracks until it gets to the end. It's just like, I don't know, just put Nikes at the start.
Yeah. See, it's funny because
the problem is I don't think there's an opener you could put here. Like maybe State Line at best, but like
it's the first Jeff solo album that feels more like a collection of songs than like an album, which is like a little
yeah, extremely. And I feel like in some sense, like some of the Bomb albums were like that. Like maybe your Scrambles or your Album Minus Band, you could maybe argue for that. But like all of Jeff's solo albums up to this point have had a very cohesive arc in their own sense. Like We Cool had the big amped up songs at the start and then the kind of slow ones at the end, rightfully so. And then Worry kind of took like, the first half of like the big songs and then the second half with the ridiculous Abbey Road style suite. And then I don't know what to say about Post because I don't listen to Post.
I like the ambitiousness of Post. I like the ambitiousness.
But
it's funny, Rose, because I was talking with you about this because I had early info about the record. I didn't get sent to me early, but I knew that it was coming, that a surprise record was coming from his publicist, and so I was like, and it was just a secret project, and they didn't say it was a Jeff solo album. I was like, is he bringing back Bomb the Music Industry? I legitimately thought like
See,
he was bringing back Bomb.
I was like 2%. Like I was only 2% sure that would ever happen because Jeff has specifically said like I will not do it unless it's just me and my friends from Bomb sitting in a bar together and there's instruments there, which is like a scenario that will literally never happen.
Yeah,
but at the same time, part of me holds out.
But I was kind of right on the Bomb comparison, not the way that I thought, but like I ended up being kind of right.
Yeah.
Like, oh yeah, this is more like a Bomb record than anything else.
Yeah, like what's the one? Fame. That reminds me a lot of Bomb material, especially with like some of the weird ways with that like bridge with the "You Will Not Control" vocals and stuff. Like that's the kind of weird shit that he'll just throw in on Bomb songs. I wish he'd do that more, just like throwing in things because he can. That's like the one thing I miss about his old work. It's just like you'll be listening to a fucking ska song, and then he'll throw in like a bridge with like this nice little tiny bleep breakdown, and then all of a sudden the worst noise you've ever heard will show up. This like that's an actual song too. Like it's on a Goodbye Cool World. I think it's Sorry Brooklyn. Yeah, that's the name of the song. Sorry Brooklyn, but dancing won't save you.
I think if there is a point that I want to jump off of that I do kind of have something to say about positively with this album is that I think Jeff's solo albums from We Cool onward have been just really well produced pop punk to the point where like Worry is this very kind of like pristine, like crisply produced thing, and like he experimented with like Grammy Jack did it again. But like post he tried to experiment with like some different things with fidelity, and I don't think they entirely worked in that album's capacity, but here he plays with it and the sort of nature of like dynamic structures in a way that really adheres to kind of the overall adjacency of the different songs and sequences of the album. Just because I keep coming back to like the ways in which the title track starts off as essentially like this lo-fi, almost kind of like almost emo adjacent like rock piece, and then just midway through turns into this just liberally borrowing from thrash song with these like screamed vocals that sound like they could be like a song in a Tony Hawk Pro Skater game.
Yeah, put Nikes on Tony Hawk Pro Skater. See how everyone feels about that.
But yeah, I think that where this album kind of lacks in coherency, I think it makes up for it in kind of throwing as many ideas and sounds as he can work with and showing kind of how he's evolved as an artist. And for that, like, I can't fault the record, especially when it does have like a really solid collection of great songs.
Yeah, I think that's a good summary.
Next album. I feel like we've run out of steam on this.
Yeah. I'll have one more thing to say, but I'm gonna wait till we get to another record because it ties into that. But
oh no,
boy.
Actually, it ties into this record too. But again, once again, this next record we're gonna discuss it very briefly, as we're probably gonna save it for our Q3 favorite / discussion list. Even though it did come out this quarter, I think like I said, there's a stark difference between May and June this year. There's been a very stark difference. Wonder why. But the new Phoebe Bridgers record, Punisher. I guess I'll start on this one. I still do not get Phoebe Bridgers. I still am not in on the Phoebe Bridgers experiment. That's what I have to call it, because when you see that much press for this record, you go, okay, this is just some kind of experiment. That's all I can say. I'm still not in on it. There's much like her last record. There are one or two, 2 or 3 songs that I like, but the rest of it is just very samey. Although there's one song I want to highlight, not for good reasons, but I want to highlight. Moon Song seems like it's a song about having an affair with Conor Oberst, and I recoil at the thought. I recoil at the thought. I don't hate Conor Oberst. I did not like Better Oblivion Community Center. I thought that record sucked because Conor Oberst sounds like a little rat, and he does not harmonize well at all with Phoebe. He sounds like and looks like a little rat. I mean, let's not beat around the bush here. But I'm not into this record. I don't care for it. Like I said, some good songs, but overall it's a little samey. It's a little, I kind of understand why so many people have come around to Phoebe Bridgers, but at the same time it's just like I get it, but I don't, I don't know.
I can posit a sort of I like this album, I think, slightly more than you, but not dramatically more than you. And I would say that I think this album simultaneously really clarifies for me why people thought that Phoebe Bridgers was going to be bigger after hearing Strange of the Alps and like also the Boy Genius project. Like I clearly can see, like, especially as but when Boy Genius came out and people were talking about those three artists in comparison, which shouldn't be the only way you compare them, but like I think that Phoebe clearly of those three is the one that had the strongest sort of pop sensibilities and has some of the same like emotionally cathartic songwriting kind of thing that like Julian does, but like with the edges significantly sanded off of it. It is not nearly as raw as uh as like really hitting you in the chest as like Turn Out the Lights or
Well, I
uh
feel like Julian is going for a very specific style that is like trying to hit you with nothing but gut punches.
oh
Like,
no, absolutely. I'm not saying that they're like trying to do the same thing or
yeah,
anything.
yeah,
I
I'm not
think that
implying you were saying that.
Phoebe Bridgers takes that kind of style and packages it in something that like does really hit you in the emotions. I think if you're someone who connects with this album, maybe more than I do, but also like is the kind of thing that could be played at Target. Some of the not in a mean way. I genuinely mean in like if you put a Julian Baker song in public, like as much as I love her, you like kind of harsh the mellow of like whatever activity is going on. And there's a certain way that Phoebe is able to channel that into I really, really love Kyoto, and I think the singles on this album are pretty good and the really strong tracks on it are pretty good, but I also do agree with you that as a whole album, it gets kind of samey in a similar way that Better Oblivion did, in a similar way that Stranger in the Alps did, where every time I listen to a Phoebe Bridgers record, there are a couple of songs I really, really like, and they usually end up in some kind of playlist rotation of mine, but it's very rare that I'm like coming back to a Phoebe Bridgers album over and over. And unfortunately, I still have not enjoyed a Phoebe Bridgers song as much as I enjoy her cover of a Mark Kozelek song, which
All
says a
right,
lot.
all right. I'm
That's
breaking
Jackson,
ranks.
I would roast you for this, but it's a great cover. It's a great cover.
It's such a
Look,
good cover. It's so
It-
great. I love it.
Yeah, it's a really great cover. And instead of actually giving a take, can I just please note the Genius page for the song, which I just pulled up because I wanted to see where Matty was getting his ideas from. And just this one person is really dedicated to trying to tell everyone it's about Connor Oberst. Like, this
it's
is
gotta
a
be
dedication.
though.
This verse is a reference to Connor Oberst. Connor Oberst had a band with Phoebe. Additionally, he got sick recently. He released a song.
Okay, all right.
Oh god.
I'm sorry, I just can't. Just
And
the
honestly,
phrase.
the tone of Genius annotations in general, I think, is something that is always very, very funny.
It's so good.
All right. Well, I'm breaking ranks. I'm ready to fight every single one of you on this record because I think it's phenomenal. Um, of course, it's the same reason that I think people keep going back to national records. You know, that kind of samey atmosphere and the samey, kind of is like, oh, all the songs kind of merged together, which is, I don't want to say that's the point because it sounds way too pretentious. I do think a little bit of her orchestration and composition can get some work done to it, but her songwriting on this album I think is pretty outstanding. It's definitely a step up from what Better Oblivion Community Center was. Definitely a step up from what Boy Genius was.
Definitely that much.
And she's going for I think it's kind of disappointing that this album had to come out when it had to come out because it carries a lot of this tone of finality to it, this tone of attempting maturity and kind of trying to work out what that means in 2020, which again is not a very good, I think, theme for this record to go through at current day. But I think give it some time and it grows into a record that really works out kind of these kings of that transitionary period of maturity. Because Stranger in the Alps, you go back and listen to Stranger in the Alps, and it definitely sounds like a record that was written by, she put that out when she was like 19 or 20 or something like that, I think.
Mhm.
I think he was
Yeah.
21 or 22.
Yeah,
Something-
she like very fresh got a record deal, and unfortunately, it was partially in part due to Ryan Adams, who is a piece of shit that we do not need to talk about. But like, still, like, it is impressive that she has gotten off the ground running so impressively from the beginning and just
Yeah.
consistently
But no,
put out great
anyway.
quality.
Yeah.
Even if I'm
But
not
no,
crazy about
anyway,
this.
so this record feels like it's trying to tread that middle ground of going from point A to point B. And so it's somewhere within that gray area of feeling out what adulthood is, trying to feel out what the rest of your life you think is going to be, or trying to feel out what you believe that life has to be, what is waiting for you at some sort of stop along the way. And it's got some great cuts. I mean, Kyoto is a great cut on here. Chinese Satellite, I think, is a great cut on here. I really love that the closer though, because I feel like I know the end that definitely more than anything else sounds like a national song, especially with that horn section to it. And I'm pretty sure that I'm very convinced that Matt Berninger did some like backup vocals on Garden Song or something. Because like he just had to. It's too baritone. It's too much like his voice, and at this point, I know what his voice sounds like. So no, I really love this record. I think it's one of the best of the year so far. I think Bridgers, I think she's starting to come into her own. I wouldn't say she's quite there yet, but I think in terms of what her output has been, at least in the last year or two, this is definitely a massive step up and a massive improvement for her.
I just want to preempt. I should have said at the beginning before I said anything. I am so sorry to the gays out
You
there.
did it
and I
again, Matty.
apologize
You
for
did it
anything that I said. I apologize to the gays. I've already stated this many times. I already stated this in the Will Wilfred Album review, but once again, I'm so sorry to the gays for what I have said. But at the same time, she may or may not be dating Connor Oberst. That's like, she's dating
No,
the little
she's
rat man. I don't
not.
like that.
Dating the little rat man doesn't invalidate
Yeah.
her bisexuality, Maddie. You can date little rat men and still be attracted to women.
Well,
right.
as a rat man myself, I love my girlfriend.
Bisexuality
I
is
love that
liking
she has
all
attraction.
women and then liking
Yeah.
one rat man.
Somehow
That's the tweets that everyone does, right?
with our membership base, we are somehow the most homophobic podcast on the planet.
She's very publicly.
Listen, I may be gay, but I'm so homophobic.
Well, my first impression of Connor Oberst was Better Oblivion Community Center, and I think that's not. I don't think that's a very good record.
Oh yeah,
I don't think it's a very good
a
record.
bad place.
And it's not.
Yeah,
It's not a
that
very
is-
good record, and I blame Connor because like the whole point of that collab album is like, oh, they're basically harmonizing like for most of that record, but they don't sound good together at all.
I will kind of agree with that. Even though there are like 3 songs on that album I will agree that it wasn't exactly like, yes, this is the pairing we've always needed. And although I will say that jumping into Connor Oberst with Better Oblivion Community Center is just an insane thing to do. And if you've never the period in my life where I've had need for Bright Eyes and Connor Oberst's music in general has mostly passed, but also you can't expect to really love his music if that's your
Connor
jumping in.
Oberst.
That's just like that's being like,
I mean,
hey, I just checked out Interpol and their new album, self-titled. I don't know, I like this band.
Hey guys, you should really get into Interpol by trying the side project of theirs. Everybody on the
Connor Oberst is a guy that at a Bright Eyes concert he's going to rant for like 5 minutes about why you should donate to Act Blue, and Phoebe isn't going to do that, but she's still going to have a booth for like the fucking Trevor Project or something like near the merch table. It's the same side. It's 2 sides of the same coin.
Look, it could have been worse. It could have been like me, and your introduction to Conor Oberst could have been Disaparacidos.
Oh, yikes.
Okay. We need to. So we're gonna wait.
We do
I
need to
would
move
say
on.
we should lay off Connor, but then there was that one photo of him that came out like a month or two ago, of him being naked, holding a guitar, covering his junk. So I feel like we don't bully him enough.
He's
honestly.
completely unproblematic. He's just a
Fair
fucking dork, and we have to take advantage of that.
I love making fun of dorks, even though I am a dork. It's a pastime.
It's projection is so much fun. I mean, like
It's
you know,
great.
it's fun. It's amazing. Okay, okay. Enough.
I love
next-
reaping. I can't wait to find out what happens when I sow.
Okay. Okay. Next record. The new Charli XCX album. How I'm feeling now.
This one is boring.
Okay.
It's fine.
See,
I
that's
like
the thing.
it.
I like it. I like it quite a bit.
The singles were good. Why is the rest not good?
Well, I disagree. Well, I
don't get
talked
it.
about this. I talked about this pretty extensively on the Endless Scroll episode I'm on, so I'm not going to say a whole lot, not to repeat myself. But this is the first the first Charli XCX album that I've heard in full that I actually like really enjoy. I think it trims the fat of the mixtapes a little bit. Not really the fat, but just like, oh, turns out you don't need to have all these features on your album. It can be really good. She stands out pretty well by herself. I think like Charli, as I said on the Endless Scroll, she has a great ear for production. Like she has a great ear for spotting production talent. Feature wise, that radar is completely fucking off. You know,
That's a good take.
It's like you get a 50-50. You either get you either get Click or you get Blame It On Your Love. There's literally like no in between for the quality.
Exactly. It's like it's either, oh wow, this is fucking amazing, versus why would you give this person any kind of publicity or promotion? Like what's going on?
Yeah,
here?
like it's like a nothing burger. Like it's not even bad. It's just like this has no reason to exist.
Exactly.
Which is perhaps the most insulting thing of all. And that's why, like, I was so amped with, because Charli, self-titled, is, like, by far my favorite thing she's put out. And I kind of thought the features, for the most part, were very quality, but, like, the heart of that album was the solo tracks in the middle, like, Silver Cross, White Ferrari, those were all, like, insanely good. I was like, okay, she's going to do a solo album that she's just putting out a month. Surely it will be good. Then the singles came out. I was like, Claws, okay. I can't remember what the second single was called. What was it again?
Was it Forever or?
Oh yeah, it was Forever. Claws, then Forever, and then the final. And then the point where I started to get worried was when I heard I Finally Understand. I was like, oh, this song's a piece of shit. Why is? Oh no. And then the rest of the album was more like that and less like the other two. I was like, so close. She almost did it.
I think you're right, Matty, that I think I enjoyed this more than Charli, the self-titled. I think that in general I like the lack of features on this, because I think, like what you're saying, not only does she have kind of a mixed record in terms of picking people to join her on albums, but also I think that she has enough like personality and ability to command a song that, like, sometimes, like, I feel like Charli and also Pop too sometimes just feel kind of like, let me stuff this feature in and this idea in, and there's like a lot going on this album too, but I felt like it works as a collective album better than some of her other. I still think Number One Angel is probably my favorite, but in general I think this album sort of reaffirms that mixtape Charli tends to be I mean, there's no difference between mixtapes and albums in the streaming era. It's all just labeling, but like in general, her projects that she labels as mixtapes are the ones I tend to enjoy a little more than like when she's trying to do a capital A like album. Here's a Charli album. And I really like this album. I think the reason, Matty, I'm pretty sure the reason why you like this album is because it's the most she's ever sounded like 100 gex, and I think that's just like I really think that's what
okay. Dylan Brady feature, but he uses it to very good effect, like production wise.
You're not wrong. You're not wrong, Jackson. I think you're on the money here, because, like I said, I generally do not like the PC Music Collective, I think for the most part, it's reminds me of like a Silicon Valley scam. You know, that's what PC Music reminds me of. It's just they got all these people to invest in it. You know, like I mean, what they signed like a deal with like Columbia or something, and
It's
then
one of
just
those new age cults.
exactly, it's like, oh wow, you know, they have this air of mystery about them, and it's like they're doing something. You know, this is the future of pop music, and then TikTok happened, and they were completely off base with what the future of pop is in terms of sound. But but again, there is good things about them. There's good things that have come from it. I think you know
Sophie is perhaps one of the great cultural outputs that PC music gave us in any capacity.
exactly. Sophie's great, and then I think the post PC music scene is a lot more interesting than PC music itself. So like artists like obviously 100 Gex, both Dylan and Laura are doing really cool, interesting stuff. Guppy is doing some interesting stuff. By the way, Guppy,
Goopy.
the sign of Tony Hawk, which is very funny to me. Because it's the one time where it's like, okay, you know, I'm okay with some nepotism because it's Tony Hawk, you know.
Tony Hawk nepotism is allowed.
Tony Hawk is allowed because he's cool. Uh, and then and of course my most listened to song this year probably has been Thos Moser from Guppy and Fraxium, which is just like which is it's post 100 Gex, which is like already weird to be like, wait, there's already like post 100 Gex music. Yes, there is. There's already post 100 Gex music.
The
It
cycle
sounds
of
like
innovation in the internet age has like collapsed in on itself. So like
Yeah.
100 Gex, who is already taking like the current sound of pop music and electronic music and like heightening it to extremes. Now there's like already people reacting to that and uploading their own insane stuff. I also think it's very funny that similarly to how you like this album because it sounds like 100 Gex, I like my favorite song on the album is Enemy, and it's just because Jimmy Stack produced it, and I love every single Jimmy Stack instrumental, so that was very unsurprising to me. But in general, I think this album, the new Charli X album, How I'm Feeling Right Now, is pretty good, and especially good considering she like made it entirely during quarantine and like didn't exist a couple months ago, and she's just like, let me crank an album out real quick. And the way that she was like interacting with fans and like having them like vote on the artwork and all that stuff was, and that was very cool and it was unique, and I think Charli is good generally.
May I offer 100 Gex post internet take here, which is that as I was re-listening to this earlier today, Pink Diamond, especially if we're talking about the Ouroboros of post internet, strikes me as if 100 Gex produced
God.
a Krayshaw song.
Oh my god, yes.
Jesus Christ.
Yes. Hell
I think
fucking
that's
yes.
what I like about it.
Oh, 100%. In this house, we'd stand Something About Cray, a 2012 album that is very important and influential, whether you like it or
I'll
not.
stand up for Cray, but I don't know about this.
But like for me, it's I feel like this is my first Charli full album. I've mostly digested her stuff in like bits and pieces and like songs here and there and the Vroom Vroom EP, but like I hadn't delved into a full album, so I might just be like entirely out of my depth here. But like it, for me, it was a lot of both times that I've listened to this album was kind of trying to find things to kind of latch onto, and all the different kinds of ideas and sounds and ways in which she merges these things kind of just were by me in a way that it just kind of doesn't really stick. And for me, the only couple of times where I think it really resonates is like Pink Diamond at the beginning, where she just goes completely overboard, and Detonate right in the middle, where she like scales it back intensely and creates something that just like is intensely vulnerable and plays on the sort of insecurities and fears that are in a lot of her lyrics and mirrors that sound wise. But otherwise, like both times that I've listened to it, by the time it gets to like the last stretch of like few songs, I've usually been checked out.
Yeah, just by the end, I'm just like, all the bad songs are at the end, in my opinion. And it's just like, I don't give a shit anymore. By the time Anthems comes around, I'm just like, really? Like, C 2.0 is maybe the one bright spot on that back end, because it's just click again. Like, but it's so good.
Look, Rose, this is an album about, you know, it's about the wonderful world of what is essentially marriage. I think the album is really good in that way. I think it's an album about, falling back in love again with your, longtime partner, because that's what seems like a majority of this album is about, is her kind of, you know
Yeah.
working things out and falling back in love with her longtime partner. And so I think it's nice and cute, and also Pink Diamond fucking bangs. If I need to state that again, it fucking bangs.
Yeah,
And
but it's one of only like 4 songs on this album that's good. So in the larger run, it kind of doesn't matter.
wrong.
I,
Okay,
I will be as wrong as I want, motherfucker.
enough,
Put
enough
that
of
on the
that.
record.
Enough of that. Enough of that. Let's get to another record that I talked about on Endless Scroll. The new Perfume Genius album, "Set My Heart on Fire Immediately." Uh, this is a good record. I still have a lot of conflicting thoughts on it, but it is very good. I think it's just one of those records you look at and you just don't. It's just such a technically perfect record that you just have a hard time kind of figuring out what to say and how to react to it at times. Uh, but one thing that I think what this record kind of reminded, or what it's kind of stated for me, is that three three to four of these records that we've talked about so far in this group Catchup are all artists that either have recently moved to LA or were basically grew up in LA. And I think that's infected their music in good ways and bad ways. And this one, it seems like, oh, this kind of, I feel like going to LA has kind of fucked up all these artists a little bit, with Jeff Rosenstock. I think it's just, I don't know what happened there. It's just, but I'm going to blame LA because it's LA. Phoebe Bridgers, she's got one of the, I think a partial reason why I've not been able to get super into Phoebe Bridgers is that she has one of the most chronic cases of LA brain that I've ever seen. And so
God damn it.
Jesus
I
Christ.
hate that you're right, is what I really don't like.
It's the Pine Grove tattoo, isn't it?
it's the Pine
No!
I'm gonna just state a tweet again. There's boys and girls that have Pine Grove tattoos. They go together very well, and then boys and oh god, and girls and who fall in love with boys that listen to Come Town.
God.
It's very similar energies going on there. For Charli, this one I don't know what to say. All I know is that she lives in LA, and I think that's infected her brain in some ways. But I think she's it's pretty late in the cycle. Like, she's been in LA for a while, it seems. So it's like, okay, so she's recovering. And then Perfume Genius, this one, I don't know. I moved to LA, and I didn't like this record as much as the last one. So that's all I have to say about the LA
This
brain theory.
record, this one's a top 10 for me of this year.
Yeah.
No Shape didn't quite hit me like everyone else here was raving about it. I was like, it's got some good stuff. Like, there's a few really great songs on that last one, but this one hit me in a different way because it's way more all over the place stylistically, and I think that's to its benefit, especially on the second half when it starts getting to those really quiet and kind of ambient tracks in a way, because Mike is really good at those. Especially he can do a lot of different styles. Like, this album just repeats the trick of No Shape with that first track where it kind of does the nice piano bit that just explodes into a really pretty beautiful song. And from there, Describe is maybe one of the coolest sounding songs I've heard all year. That kind of shoegazy insane guitars that is just and then just the sound design on this album over everything else is what fascinates me more than everything. Also, I like how there's a random funk song in the middle.
You talk about On the Floor?
Yeah, On the Floor. It's just he just threw that in there. Yeah, this is going in.
Yeah, it's so for me, I'm kind of in a similar situation as you, Rose, where I have been a big Perfume Genius fan for the last 3 or 4 years, and I did get really into No Shape when it came out, but something about the album as a whole didn't entirely click with me, but I did keep coming back to it, and specifically kinds of the pairing of Other Side and Slip Away that's at the very beginning, which just kind of sets almost too high a standard for that album to live up to.
Yeah.
But with this one, I feel like it is the first album from him since probably his earlier days, where I feel like it's really kind of sustained that consistency all the way through, just even in the sense of like that span of like the first 6 songs on the album are the ones that I like always come back to, and they feed into each other so well, and they do a great sense of introducing all of the different modes of the album, so that way when he does transition into the sparser material that litters a lot of the back half, it feels like it's been something that he's slowly been building toward the entire time. And I don't know, I think part of where I bring my attachment to it is right before this album had come out, I had listened to Put Your Back Into It for the first time a few months ago, and like the night the album came out, as I was sitting down with it, I was kind of laughing to myself, because I was like, I weep for anybody who listened to Describe and On the Floor and thought they were getting another guitar heavy album, when in reality it's basically Put Your Back Into It Part 2, but with a bigger budget. Where it's these very kind of sparse piano heavy songs that really make you reflect on the emptiness and put the lyrics like extremely upfront in a way that the last couple of albums hadn't done.
Yeah, like I feel like he kind of decided like I'm going to go back to my bread and butter of songwriting, and it kind of works in his favor in a way, because it's like a much more enhanced version of that, like just beautiful.
I very much agree with what you both are saying about this album, and I actually, in a similar way, I like this album significantly more than No Shape, and probably more than Too Bright as well. I really, really, really enjoy it, and as someone who's always liked Perfume Genius, but has had difficulty like getting really into his music, I was trying to describe this in my music board review I did today, but it's like, it's a certain quality that certain kind of art pop music tends to have for me sometimes, where it's like No Shape and Too Bright are albums that are immaculately put together and very technically well done, but there's something like kind of hermetically sealed about it, where it's like there's very clearly like deep sincere emotion in these songs. It's not like they're just flat. Like I can tell that Mike puts a lot into these songs, and the songwriting on them is so good, but like there was always something about the kind of sound of Perfume Genius that felt kind of hard for me to immerse myself in, and I always felt like I was sitting on the outside, like looking at like an art exhibit, like this is very beautiful, but I'm not like in it in the way that you kind of want to be. And I found this album to achieve that much more effectively. I think the kind of, there's a lot going on this album, but like you're saying, I think it works incredibly well together, the way the tracks flow into each other, the way it's sequenced. And I think the production, he pairs it back a lot while also still having the level of attention to detail and the level of budget and scale to it that like No Shape had, which allows like the bells and whistles that are on all these songs to kind of shine, as opposed to feeling like there's just so much going on that it kind of all blends into each other. Like the guitars on Describe are so good. I really like some of the parts in this album where his vocals start like doubling over onto each other, and there's like these different echoes of his voice like layered on top of each other. I think there's some really, really, really cool stuff going on with the production of this album. And even though I have not spent a ton of time to it, I just kind of got around to it in the last day or so, I really like this album a lot, and I expect to return to it more than I have the last couple of. My only real complaint, though, and it's not so much a complaint, because on one hand I understand why it was left off, but I really would have loved to see Eye in the Wall on this album.
God, that
fucking
song was absolutely nuts.
So he's
so good.
From what I understand, putting out the collection of things that were part of the dance piece that and Pop Song were on later in the year, which is great because there are like at least a couple songs on there that he hasn't like officially released just go way harder than like anything else he's put out. Like one of the last songs is basically what I imagine people who wanted like Describe on this album but heavier are going to be like intensely satisfied by.
That's me right here. Hello.
Hit me with a good time.
That's wonderful to hear though, because like Eye on the Wall was like a revelation for me listening to that song last year and being like, whoa, like Perfume Genius can sound like this. And I get why it doesn't make sense on this album in particular, because this album is mostly kind of stripped back. And even though I like some of the detours that this album makes, like On the Floor, I think is a real nice change of pace in the middle of it. But like, I agree that putting an 8 minute long intense song like that probably would have tipped the balance of this album in a way. And so I would love to see like an EP's worth of tracks like that, like Pop Song and Eye on the Wall. But yeah, it's good. I like this album.
Good music.
I should restate. This album is really good. I do like it quite a bit. It's just like, because I went back to No Shape recently and I was like, oh man, this hasn't held up as well as I thought it would. And that made me sad. But I do need to listen to more of the back catalog. I need to listen to the first two records because I think that would help unlock this album a little more for me. But it's still really good. It's still a big. It's a really good record. It's still really fucking good. It's got some honkers.
Also, Matty, on the subject of LA Brain, yes, yes, being in the city can poison your brain. It is true. Counterpoint, only we're allowed to say that. Fuck you.
My response to that is no. I just call it like I see it, buddy. Okay, I call it like I see
All
it.
right,
See,
fair enough.
Jackson, you don't have LA brain because like you actually spent like a portion of your most significant years in the Midwest. So
Yes, I had an apprenticeship in being from the Midwest, which helped me cure my LA brain.
exactly. It humbled you. It made you see the error of the LA ways potentially. But so
That is actually true though. Like meeting people from Michigan was a good growth point for me in my life.
as Felix from Chapo has said, the Midwest is the greatest nation in the United States by far. It's amazing, baby. The Balkans of the United States. Let's fucking do this. Okay. All right.
We need to move on.
Okay.
This one is pretty niche, so we can probably hurry it along if we want to do it.
Yeah.
I'll turn to the others.
We can touch on it. I wanted
because
briefly.
I at least want to mention it because God,
Yeah.
damn it, it's good.
Yeah,
Peaceful as Hell by Black Dresses. Like, I can't believe that Rook and Debbie are able to put out this much insane quality music both on their own and until now as a group. Like, it is absolutely absurd. Like, and this album especially is maybe one of their best. Like, I'm still very much on the thank you train.
For me personally, but that's
yeah, I understand that. Like, I'm still with Lily on being like, Thank You is their best album.
I'm in agreement with Thank You, and probably Hell is Real is probably like my double pairing. Like,
oh yeah, because that EP is also very wonderful as well. Like, but this album has like an insane run, especially at the start. Like some of their best songs.
Yeah, the A side of this album is the best thing they've ever done, in my opinion.
It's just a wonderful work about friendship and just trying to be yourself, even if you don't quite really have any comfort in being that.
Yeah.
It has some of the most candid writing on autism that I've ever related to. Like, this album is extremely, I'm just like, I understand this, and I wish somebody made more music like this for me.
Yeah. And to add on to that, I really like how the album kind of thematically transforms that content into eventually kind of bringing into the fold these different elements of sort of making a plea to kind of just be accepted and to be kind of just treated normally and not all these different ways in which the world kind of breaks you down and draws like obsessive attention onto you as it goes on. And for on that note, the like last run of the album where it's just this consistently great flow of Please Be Nice into Creep You into 666, which are all dealing with similar themes and about eventually kind of pulling oneself together communally and having those people to help pull you through, I think is one of the strongest kinds of thematic through lines in their entire discography.
Oh, extremely. Like, I feel like at the center of it has always been their friendship together. Like, that is the one thing that will survive is just love and friendship for each other above anything else. And it's touching in a way that I feel like few other bands hit it with that much heart.
And speaking of friendship, the goddamn scream chorus on "Beautiful Friendship" goes so fucking.
Yes.
Oh my god!
That
I
song
think
is absolutely ridiculous, but I love it so
it,
much.
it really is kind of a. It's such a bummer that this album ended up being. We don't have to get into all that, but like
Yeah,
it
we do
really
not.
was.
We absolutely do not.
It really was such a like leveling up in many ways, and like it feels like such a culmination of the last couple of Black Dresses albums. The way that their songwriting style has evolved over the course of the couple of them, and also the way that their production style has evolved, and they've continued to work new things into their sound that just seem like it shouldn't be able to be easily inserted. Like the fact that I joked with Lily when this album came out, it's like Black Dresses were already the most Lily band to ever exist, and then they were like, but what if we added new metal? And then scale just
It's
tipped
true.
all the way. Like
They've
Oh
dipped
yeah,
deep into that pool.
this album cranks the new metal up like 100 times from like where they were previously.
And it's glorious, to be honest.
Oh,
it does
absolutely.
indeed slap.
Like even even the moments on this album where you're just like, how did they pull that off? You're still just like, oh my god, they pulled it off well. Like that little bit, and I believe it's I'm always a freak because I'm a freak because I'm always freaked out. Like that bit where it just goes into Debbie singing over the little MIDI instrumental, and then somehow they manage to punch it back into those like insanely hard drums. You're just like, oh my god. And of course, like the lyrics on that section are, oh god. Like, hang on, I'm gonna pull that up if y'all want to talk for a little,
Let's say I
for a few more seconds.
I heard Wiggum going off.
Oh, that might be my cat.
Oh. Okay, there's so many cats, so many cats. Is it okay if I do a bit real quick? I mean it in no
I'm
disrespectful way.
concerned, but go ahead.
If it's
As
bad, I
long
will
as
cut
it's
it.
sensible and reasonable.
It's sensible and reasonable. I hope. You know that video of the like the from like the mid maybe I guess late 2000s of that one dude, like the one emo dude holding the knife and singing that one song.
I don't know what you're talking about.
Very
Okay,
vague.
we're
don't know
gonna ban the
either.
bit. We're gonna ban the bit. We're gonna ban the bit.
Okay, so like
No,
the
if no one gets the
specific
roast,
set of lines is like maybe one of my favorite things in any song all year. I want to give people a chance, but they keep letting me down. I want to be wrong again. I want to be wrong about being wrong. This world shouldn't need to feel so lonely. Is it because I'm too angry to be around anyone again? And then simply fuck this shit. Like that is such a beautiful encompassing of a lot of feelings that I have. Like I talked earlier about this, but like Black Dresses are so good about writing about feelings that you can't put into words yourself. I think that is one of their greatest strengths.
I also really love the refrain on that song. I'm so cute and well.
So I'm so cute and well adjusted. Like that's the final word because you know what? I am, motherfucker.
It's relatable.
Yeah.
Anyways,
all right.
God.
We have
more.
again. We're to the end. We have 2 or 3 records left to discuss. 2, and then like,
If we wanted this third, the next one is very optional. Just in
okay,
case.
we'll save this one that's next. We'll save it for last. We'll get into one that I think Nat and I can probably touch on pretty.
I can
briefly.
also touch a little base on this.
How do you pronounce his name?
Namdi.
Thank you.
Namdi. Yeah.
Namdi. Brett. A fucking amazing record. One of my favorite albums of the year that I've heard so far. It's my friend Taylor recommended it to me because it was on my list. Like I heard some buzz on Indieheads and I just it just stayed in my saved albums thing on Spotify for a while. And then he kind of gave me that extra push and like, damn, this is a fucking good record.
Yeah, this album fucking rules. I was looking into it like earlier in the month when he had put out the last kind of EP that had come out toward the beginning during that first Bandcamp day. But like this particular album, I had heard of Namdi just years before and just put him on my radar for the longest time, but never got around to it. And something about hearing him brought up several times during this past month has made me finally dig in. And this is just a really fantastic piece of just weird art, avant-garde art pop that blends in so many different genres and styles and just goes in so many completely different places, but they all feel so uniquely Namdi's, and the command that is had over some of these just different sounds is impeccable. And plus this thing has like hooks on hooks on hooks, and the production is fantastic and note perfect, and like one of the crispest things ever, especially for like an indie production. I have just been fully sucked into this record the last couple of months or last couple of weeks.
Yeah, see, this album is very weird. It's one of those ones that like it feels like something I should like, but I can't quite crack it open quite yet. And I feel like that's partially just because I like Drool a little better. Like I think that album more achieves his styles better, just his very weird style. And this album, like one of my favorite elements about it is the way it kind of subtly puts in math rock instrumentation in a way. Like it shows up here and there on the album when it wants to, but like it's used to very good effect.
Yeah, Rose, did you know that he drums in a math rock band?
I did not know he was in any other bands because I'm not like a huge head for his work, so I did not. But it makes sense, like it tracks. I was just like, the influence is very obvious here, and it works very well.
Yeah, as I was digging more and more into this album, as I've been getting obsessed over it, I've quickly found that Namdi is like one of the like cornerstones of like the indie DIY scene in Chicago, and is just in like an obscene amount of like different bands and projects and things, and one of them includes drumming for a math rock band.
Yeah, but this album is very great. However, I think I actually like the EP he put out a few weeks ago called Black Plight even more. It's only 3 tracks, but it leans way more into like the rock style. And it's actually kind of very neat because it's just like some of the most direct, like fucking angry lyrics that I've heard in a while. It's very of the moment, and it also works, even though it's a lot rougher around the edges.
If I may very quickly, while we are on this topic, I don't have too much more to say, but I want to say while we're on kind of angry frustration, pent up Namdi stuff, Semantics, big song of the year contender for me. Just the ways in which it slowly bubbles up this kind of quiet instrumental and has all these very sort of subtle production tricks that you don't catch unless you're on headphones, and the ways in which the lyrics kind of run over and jam different measures or like completely just erode the time signature that it starts with, and the way that it just keeps building those things up until it just outright explodes with him just yelling the chorus over and over, fuck it, put it on me, for the last minute, is just one of the like biggest mic drops in any song this year, and I love it.
Yeah, it's pretty damn great. It's such an exciting combination of genres. It's just, I'm very, very excited to see the future of his career. It's like, damn, like this is a fucking knockout record. Like I'm excited to see what it is next. I need to check out the EP still, so I'm gonna get on that hopefully this week. But yeah, that's a high recommendation from most of us here.
And speaking of young up and comers who were excited to see more,
this podcast has been going for 2 hours. Well, it doesn't really sound like that anymore, but you know this.
That's right, folks. We're going to talk about indie.
I can't
artist
believe we're
Bob
letting Jackson
Dylan.
talk about 2 different albums that are both
God.
2 hours long.
I don't even have.
This one's an hour and 11. Okay.
So it's a crisp 70 minutes.
But don't worry, guys. It has a 17-minute song about the JFK murder, so you know you're getting that good quality.
I love. Was it Zach that wrote the write up for this one? Who's like,
Yes.
It just sounds like an Onion headline. Like Bob Dylan has written a 17-minute long song about the JFK assassination,
And you know, and some of the lines in it are just so ridiculous. Like at some point on this album, he compares himself to Anne Frank, and then like I can't remember who it is after that, but like the line is such an extreme.
So we're gonna have
he does
the
not care
the
anymore.
Crank supergroup with Bob Dylan, Jeff Mangum, Mark Kozelek, Connor Oberst. Who else am I missing here?
Cranks.
Are we,
I don't
are we
know.
about to say Cranks or
they're
Ratman?
the
Who are
same
we
thing.
discussing?
They're all the same thing.
Yeah.
Bob Dylan is the original Ratman. He's the original Ratman of music.
The OG Ratman. I've only listened.
Nah, Bob Dylan is clearly a seagull. Can you not hear the inflection of his voice?
Let's have a discourse real quick. Is Bob Dylan a short king?
I don't know. I don't know if that counts anymore.
He's
He's like 80 years old. I don't know if you could call him a short king or just old.
Yeah, you said just Oh god.
I mean, he's 5'7". You know, he's 5'7".
Okay,
Listen,
yeah.
I will not let you call him a king just for the Christian albums, okay? I gotta draw the line
I feel like
somewhere.
Bob Dylan being like really, really short, it's informed probably a lot of his career. I've only listened to like one of his albums, but like I already feel like, oh yeah, he really takes the 5'7" thing. You could hear it subtly in his music, how much he hates the fact that he's not 6 foot.
I mean, I was
Hi,
obviously
Rose.
sold on this album the moment someone was like, "This is the most Bob Dylan has ever sounded like Mark Kozelek." And in general, like,
Nani?
and in general, I feel like whenever I hear people talk about Bob Dylan and the way that like boomers like say like, "Oh, he reflects the American experience and this and this and that, and he's meta and he does this and that," like the way I hear people who talk about Bob Dylan reminds me a lot of the way I have my relationship with Mark Kozelek's music. But the only difference is that Bob Dylan is like a cornerstone of American culture, and Mark Kozelek is me in a corner. Like, come on, guys! Like,
You're the world's
come
first
check it out.
Kozelologist, like Dylanologist, you know?
Exactly. And I've only listened to this album once, but I definitely like it a lot as far as what you can possibly expect from like a late period Bob Dylan album. Like, it's very interesting, and I think some of the songwriting, especially with this being like probably one of the last Bob Dylan albums we're gonna get, it's very reflective on his life and career and history and stuff like that. And I think there's a lot of very interesting stuff going on in this album, and also a lot of bullshit.
It's the Virgin Cause and the Chad Bob Dylan. The Virgin Cause.
I feel like he is fully transcended not giving a shit. Like he has gone layers and layers beyond not giving a shit.
The Virgin Cause makes 20 minutes. Yeah, the Virgin Cause makes 20-minute long songs about boxing and tries to play up how quirky and off the rails it is. And Bob Dylan just dropped 17 minutes about JFK, and he just will not give a shit. And he will keep it up, and he's never gonna be like, I wonder how many albums I can put out in a year and push my the audience doesn't care anymore. The audience doesn't care anymore. Meanwhile, Cause is like, I can put out 3 albums.
He will give you 3 albums.
Cause is like, I can put out 3 albums and
just
fuck with them and take, just see how much I can squeeze out of this. Dylan sees no like inherent artistic quality to anything that he's doing on this album, and it's wonderful. And it's the antithesis of the Cause, and that's what makes this album so good.
If I may,
go ahead, Matt.
Okay, I was gonna say, if I may drop another piece of dudes rock connection here. For me, this is kind of the closest analog. This is kind of the musical equivalent of The Irishman, where you just have an album.
It is what it is. You're right.
Look, hear me out. But the album itself is often Dylan at his most Dylan, just in the sense that he clearly does not give as much of a shit, and like it's not super cohesive in the ways in which lots of people might want him to be, but he's never truly been. But when it does kind of touch on those like recurring subjects that come on throughout, it is almost entirely things like mortality and like what sort of legacy people, especially like artists and historical figures, leave behind. The fucking goddamn end of the album is him saying that people are going to want to request to hear the song that he is just singing now, which is
an extremely Mark Kozelek move.
And you know what? He's probably not going to play it. He's probably going to play like every song.
He will never play any of these songs live.
Yeah, and the thing is, like, even when he does play songs that people want, he plays them in forms that are unrecognizable. That's how much of an anti-crowd pleaser he is, and he's a goddamn king for that. That's the only time I will call him a king.
Hey, anyways, let's return to some
one more
discourse.
bit before I.
Hold on. Let's play a little game. Let's play a little game real quick, because Pitchfork gave this Dylan album a 9, and I want to see what the last like the non-acapella or non like standards album that he put out.
It was like a 6-ish because it was Tempest.
Yeah, hold on. Let's see here. So Rough and Rowdy Waves gets a 9. He gets like every like Sunday review under the sun. Where the hell is Tempest? There's
on the
Tempest.
extra pages, yeah. 6.8, I was right.
Okay, there it is. Okay, so Tempest got a 6.8. What was the last Cause album to get a 6.8 or higher? Who wants to take a crack at it?
I am gonna go and guess that
Universal Themes.
Universal Themes is exactly.
No, I can tell you for sure it's not Universal Themes. The one that's got higher than a 6.
Universal Themes has a 6. I forgot because that's a lyric in a Cause song where he says, "And Pitchfork gave me a 6 yesterday," and I said, "Well, what took them so long?"
Okay, the last one to get above. I'm just gonna say it's probably Benji. It's either Benji or the Mark Kozelek self-titled. One of the two.
Okay, so the Mark Kozelek self-titled.
God damn it! I'm so mad.
The Mark Kozelek self-titled got exactly a 6.8. Common is Line in Love got a 6.5.
Coward.
Jezu Sunkill Moon got a 7.5.
Cowards.
Yeah.
That's right, and that's one that I feel like I know a lot of people that aren't like massive Cause heads that really gravitate toward the Cause Yesu collab album, the first one. That one is a classic for sure, but also they are fools, and especially for giving I Also Want to Die in New Orleans. It feels like the score for every single one of those albums has nothing to do with the content of the album itself, and it is just like they're trying to give him a lower score in hopes that it will get him to stop. They're like, please, I don't want to have to keep reviewing these. Like,
and it's like the Rich Homie Quan meme of like, I will never stop going in.
Exactly.
Why haven't you still learned your lesson, old man? When are you gonna learn your lesson?
Especially now that like his career has been so cemented by Benji, it's like from that moment on, he's just like, if I can alienate a couple people by doing something more obscure and less what they want from me, the better. And so the Pitchfork is clearly just like, why isn't he singing? And I'm like, he doesn't need to sing. It's fine.
I think
needs him.
I think one of my favorite moments when I saw him live last year. Oh god, what a concept! Seeing an artist live, what an amazing concept. One of my favorite things that happened was he did the cover of that one. Who's Maya Rudolph's mom?
Oh, what's it called? Minnie Riperton?
Yes. He did a cover of that Minnie Riperton song, and he fucking knocked it out of the park. And he was like, yeah, I'm doing this song just to remind you guys that I can actually fucking sing, by the way. So that's the thing about that. That's the thing about Kozelek is that he can still sing. He can still sing really fucking well. He just chooses not to because he's just that powerful, and I respect it so much.
Also, few things have aged like as poorly as Universal Themes. Listen to the fucking the Universal Themes review. Universal Themes is aged like a fine wine. The
Are
review.
you dissing the Kozelek album? You?
Mark Kozelek's songs are longer, the hooks are fewer, and the observations are less profound and less likely to have you reflecting on your own life. Wrong. It is ultimately a spotty album from a guy who has released a lot of spotty albums. That's just some bullshit right there. Especially because Universal Themes, like at the time, seemed like more disheveled, but like going back to it, it's so much more profound than like a lot of the stuff to come after that. So they're all just judging it based on like whatever the last thing they heard, and they're like, "Oh, this isn't Benji." And
So do we all remember who wrote the review for Benji?
was it Ian Cohen?
It was supposed
It was Ian
Yeah,
Cohen.
no.
Motherfucker.
It was supposed to. No, wasn't it supposed to be Cohen, and then they swapped him out like last
No,
minute?
Universal Themes was supposed to
No,
be
it's Cohen. It's
Oh,
Cohen.
it's still Cohen.
Yeah, no. Universal Themes.
Benji was
not
Cohen. Universal Themes was supposed to be Cohen.
Yeah, and they took him off it because that was also when Universal Themes was also released at the peak of Mark Kozelek is problematic or canceled or whatever that whole thing was. And so I think Pitchfork was trying to be like, we blew a lot of steam up this guy's ass, so we can't have Ian give this another super favorable review, and we need to take it down. And it's such a bummer because
And then the thing is, Ian went to Stereo Gum to go talk about Communist Lightning's Love, and it's like one of the most insane reviews that website has ever had.
Okay, but
Pitchfork brought Cohen back for the Mark Kozelek self-titled album, and when you read the review, it's like, okay, he obviously loves this one, but then Pitchfork higher-ups were like, you cannot give this above a 7.
Please, this isn't worth that, Ian. You can only spend so many of your points on emo records, okay?
And then Ian Cohen says, Mark Kozelek machine go burr.
To go back to something that Nat said real quick when she said that Rough and Rowdy Ways is just the Irishman of albums, I can't get the line out of my head now. Is I heard you contain multitudes.
Oh my
Good
God.
Lord.
Incredible.
Chef's kiss.
Okay. We're at the 2 hours point of the podcast. We should wrap this up. But there is one more loose end.
There is not. Matty, I'm not letting you talk about Madlow on this podcast.
I did not write this down in the Google Doc.
Yeah,
I swear to
I was the one who
God.
wrote it down because I was just like, just in case we need to talk about Bolt Cutters or Madlow some more, perhaps we can. I did not want Matty to get on his soapbox. I just wanted, if anybody who wasn't in either of those episodes wanted to drop some light opinionation on that, you can go ahead. Though I was responsible for both.
I have not listened to the album. I have no desire to listen to the album. I will never listen to the album.
Wow, that's really strong to take about Bolt Cutters.
Oh, God.
I will just add, if we are touching on these albums, that I was not on Bolt Cutters cast, but I will say, one, that there's nothing I can say really that you guys didn't cover well enough on that. That was a really great episode of the pod. Really enjoyed it. But Bolt Cutters is the album of the year. It's the only album that's ever existed. Music did not exist before or after Bolt Cutters and will not exist. That it is the sun. It eclipses all of art.
You have a point.
That's my take.
And then that's a great way to describe Fiona Apple, but I feel like instead of saying Fiona Apple, you should have said car seat headrest.
Shut him down.
Matty, I'm even a mild Madlow defender. Like I like it more than the people in this chat that are angered by it, but still,
I don't hate it.
I'm just not going to allow you.
Yeah, me neither. That's the thing, is like I think it's like a nice middling car seat headrest album, which even that I will stand for. But I'm not gonna let Matty soapbox and say this is the best fucking album of the year.
I've said what I said. I said what I said on the original pod. I said what I said on Endless Scroll. I've said what I needed to say about this record. I will have a whole Madlow manifesto at the end of the year for album of the year 2020 on the subreddit. So I will not say anything
Someone will
more
make
until then.
my
I'm gonna
bolt cutters essay look sane.
I'm gonna bubble my thoughts. I'm gonna bubble my thoughts until then because I'm still gestating on the record a little bit, but I like it a lot still. My opinions do not change. There's like maybe 2 records that can maybe top it for me this year. One is the Black Country New Road debut album that has a chance to top it, and then the possible Lomelda double album that's coming out. Which, by the way, literally, it's not confirmed at all. She's not said anything as such, but uh, her label's owner said that they're pressing their first double album ever, and it's like, oh, that suspiciously lines up with the fact that Lomelda said that her new album is done. And this is an album that was probably supposed to come out earlier, but she spent some extra time on it. So again, Lomelda double album. I'm gonna just keep saying it. I'm just gonna keep trying to manifest it until it's in my hands.
Please, because Jif, I would like to see it. Is how I would respond to that. I would very much like to see, and yeah, for me, I think looking forward, the thing I'm by far most excited for is we are 2 weeks out from Proto Martyr season finally.
Hell yes!
And I listened to Michigan Hammers today for the first time because I could not resist the RoboCop themed music video, which recreates the entire plot of RoboCop using stock footage.
I was surprised when you said you hadn't seen it because I was like, this is the most you thing that I could imagine.
100%. Yeah, like I tuned out because I was like, I can't keep listening to the singles. I knew that there was another single that came out, but somehow I also missed the music video. And then once I saw that, I was like, okay, fine. And yeah, Proto Martyr's fucking 3 for 3 on singles. They're so good. It's so clearly the best stuff they've ever put out, and like really feels like it's taking what I've liked about the other 3 Proto Martyr. Actually, this is their 5th album now, I think, because No Passion, All Technique was 2012, and then there's 3 after that. But I think it really feels like the elements of Proto Martyr are gelling together, and I'm fucking fired up for this new album that's finally coming out.
Alrighty.
Nice.
Alrighty.
Wait, what? I got one more album to rant about. Don't worry, I'll make it quick.
Okay.
It'll be quick. I just want to say the only album that can top the list for me, other than Bolt Cutters at this point, is New K-Day Debbie McCallion collab.
Oh, true.
Oh, that shit's gonna be insane. Magic Firebrain out sometime this year.
Alrighty. That finally does it. Once again, we have there's a normal podcast time for us, and that's around a minute and 30 seconds, maybe a little over, maybe a little under. Then you add Jackson to the equation, and then that adds 40 minutes to whatever your original podcast length was going to be. So that's where we're at. Sorry, Jackson, I gotta say it.
Ariana Grande, Jif, and What About It?
Good.
Okay. All right. Nevertheless, hopefully you all enjoyed this podcast. We will see you all again soon. Bye-bye. We love you. And yeah, peace out.